and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And tonight we will be discussing The Delve by Dan Fitzgerald. But first, Sarah, what's something good that happened recently?
Something good that happened recently is the Tarvalon.net community.
Oh,
just them.
Wonderful.
I've been a member of the site for a while, and they're just lovely people, and I like all of them. So they are my good thing. All, however many of them there are.
Well, that's an awful lot of good things, I presume.
Yeah, yes, it is, because I think there's I don't actually know how many active members are on the site. What's your good thing?
Similarly vague. Baldur's Gate 3, the developers, Larian Studios, recently released that for opening weekend, there were 1,227, I believe, hours played. No, years? Something crazy.
Oh, that's a lot.
Some huge number. The opening weekend had more hours played than there were man hours to create the game.
Oh, wow.
Something incredible like that. I'm sure I'm quoting it wrong. But I'm part of that number. That's me.
That's very lovely.
It's not. I mean, yay, I'm on a bandwagon. But I fucking love Larian, all of the games they make. And of course, Baldur's Gate 3 is incredible, as anyone who listens to the podcast knows, I think.
I'm pretty sure this is at least the third episode where it is involved in being your good thing.
That's important. It's really all I have left in my brain. The fact that I can even talk about a book is, high praise for the book.
I'm pretty impressed that we have not gone on a month-long hiatus just so you could play Baldur's Gate 3, to be honest.
I already kicked this episode back by 2 days.
Sometimes you just have to play video games.
It's a good game, though. All right, anyway, I'm not gonna sit here and justify my nerddom. What you drinking tonight?
Not gonna wax any more lyrical about Baldur's Gate than you already have.
Oh, I could, but that's a whole episode.
What am I drinking tonight? I am drinking in honor of the Delve and the whiskey that they drink in it, although I don't remember its name, because I have to confess that I read this book on the plane to Portugal because we weren't intending for it to be a podcast book, and then it turned into a podcast book, but I had read it recently enough that I didn't reread it. All of that to say, I'm drinking whiskey.
Hot Stone. The Timon, which is how I pronounce the word that is effectively dwarves from this book, make hot stone, which is basically whiskey.
So what are you drinking?
Hot Stone.
Also whiskey.
Yeah. Cheers.
Planja.
Well, have you read anything good lately?
I've read 500,000 words of fan fiction. They're good words.
Damn.
They're good words. Fic that I like that gets updated, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, got updated. And I decided it had been long enough since I had read any of it. And I'm pretty sure that I actually skipped the last update. So I was like, I'm just going to read all 84 chapters of this.
Oh, shit. What fandom?
Harry Potter.
You hesitated so long. I'm not editing that hesitation out.
You don't, because I don't like to admit that I read Harry Potter fan fiction because J.K. Rowling is a horrible person, and I don't actually like the books all that much. So why do I read so much Harry Potter fan fiction? I don't know.
Because other creators are great. You shouldn't have to apologize for that.
It's true. And this author, May Marlowe, is good. I enjoyed all 500,000 words.
I don't remember what exactly rekindled my interest in the Hobbit fan fiction. Was it the Delve? Because there are so many dwarves in it? No, I remember what. It's also Baldur's Gate.
Somehow that does not surprise me.
Okay, so in Baldur's Gate, you can make your character, which I made my lady dwarf with a luxurious beard, as you do.
As she deserves.
And then the second step is that you can create their guardian or soulmate or whatever. Still not really sure what's going on with that. Pretty sure it's nefarious, but I don't know yet. And you go through the entire visual character creation, like the same steps. You can choose like race, gender, all that stuff for your guardian. But I was like, well, if I'm a dwarf, obviously my guardian is Bilbo Baggins. So I got as close to Bilbo Baggins as I could for my guardian. And then I was like, well, now I want to read Thor and Bilbo fan fiction. So I did.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing in between podcast reading.
Not a bad thing to do at all.
No, not at all. Also, it's very funny having Bilbo Baggins show up occasionally and go, I am the only thing standing between you and the Illithid.
Do you get to name your characters?
No.
Okay, so
wait. My character, yes.
Okay, but not the Bilbo Baggins character.
No.
So you didn't get to actually call him Bilbo.
No, but that's who it is. Because who else would be the guardian angel of the dwarf?
Right, obviously. But it would be even funnier if, like, that was the character tag.
It would. Anyway, that's what I have been reading.
It's just been a fan fiction kind of week then.
It has. You know what other kind of week it's been?
A delve kind of week.
Yeah, we be delving.
We do be delving. So we read, as Lily mentioned, as you mentioned, we read The Delve by Dan Fitzgerald, which is a standalone novel.
Is it though?
Well, okay, let me finish what I was going to say to introduce it, and then we could argue about whether or not it's a standalone novel. It's a standalone novel that takes place, I forget how many years before, but it takes place
many
centuries before the events of his Hollow Road trilogy. So he has a number of books out by now that all kind of take place in this I don't even want to call it a shared world because it's the same world, it's just different time periods.
In this setting? In
this setting, yeah. And The Delve is one of them.
I really enjoyed this book. I immensely enjoyed this book. Is it weird to say physically enjoyed this book?
I think Dan would appreciate it. But I don't know. I don't know how other people would take it.
This is a very smutty book and it was very good. I'm really glad this was not my first book in this setting, though. I don't think you should read this book first.
I don't know. I think that you could read this book first. Like, maybe it's different. Maybe I'm not coming to it. Well, obviously, I'm not coming to it as someone who hasn't read any of his other books. I haven't read all of them, but I've read the first 2 books of his Hollow Road trilogy. Still really need to read the 3rd book, the final book. And I've read The Living Waters and The Isle of a Thousand Worlds. Also, we had an interview with him about The Living Waters, so you can go and listen to our talk with him, that episode. So I've read 4 of his books, not counting this one, 5 counting this one. So obviously, like, I'm familiar with the world, but I still think that this would be a decent standalone, like a decent entry point. There's some stuff that he doesn't go into a lot of detail about, like, the mare-human conflict, or he doesn't go into a lot of background about that, even though it's a central conflict in the book. But I don't think you necessarily need to know a lot about that. Like, I think he gives you enough context for what's going on.
I agree. The history is not my stumbling block. I felt like the reader's introduction to the world was not as good as if you read The Hollow Road first. That's not fair because The Hollow Road is about humans who are encountering the Maiar for the first time. And I'm specifically overpronouncing it because I don't want to just say like the mayor, because that's the mayor of a town. No, the mayor, the Maiar. I don't know.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that we had this conversation.
We did.
About how to pronounce mayor before.
I genuinely think it's pronounced mayor, but I think that's confusing verbally. So I'm going to mispronounce it for clarification.
Okay. It's going to be that kind of episode.
Yeah. Because The Hollow Road is presented by outsiders encountering the Maiar for the first time, you get a much more in-depth description of everything. Whereas in this book, it is presented as, well, the Maiar are the main characters, and so of course they know what's going on, so why would they go and describe their magic in extreme detail? Which I appreciate from an aesthetic perspective, but because it's been a year or so since I've read the other books, I was still like, kind of scraping for information, you know?
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, you're definitely much more dropped into the world in this than you are in Hollow Road. I didn't find that a big stumbling block.
I would argue that in Hollow Road, you're also dropped into the world, but you're dropped into it from a human's perspective, and so it's much easier to get your groundings because it's more familiar.
Okay, sure, but I still didn't find it a stumbling block in the Delve.
There are three main characters, I would argue.
Yes.
The three main mayor, Maiar. I've already gone back on my promise. The mayor. Egland, Arden, and Aini.
Ardo.
Ardo?
Yeah.
Okay.
You said Arden, but it's Ardo.
Thank you. The point was, Egland is described as having a helmet that's carved into the shape of a very specific creature that I don't have any idea what creature that is. I have read the entire book, and I still don't know what shape his helmet is in.
Sure. I mean, I guess when I think about it, I don't really know either, but that didn't bother me. Like, okay, it's in the shape of a fantasy creature. That's fine.
Yes, that specific thing is not a problem, but that's an example of there were some things that I was just like, all right, I guess I'm just never gonna note this. Let's keep rolling.
Yeah, I don't like I didn't have anything where that bothered me. I found it all to be pretty accessible. And what I didn't know, I could infer.
I think I did too, but I'm worried that that's only because I had read The Hollow Road.
Yeah, but you read it so long ago. I mean,
But I still knew what the mayor were.
yeah, but like that gets explained.
No, but I think I had more background details that made the rest of it graspable.
I think it would have been graspable even if you hadn't had some of that context. But I agree that it's probably easier if you do.
Yeah, I would not recommend this being your first Fitzgerald book. How's that?
I think it would be fine if it was.
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good book, but I think it's much more approachable, and I think it'd be more fun if you kind of had some more knowledge.
I mean, I definitely think that it's fun because like all of his books have been interconnected. And so it's really interesting to see how they connect. Because even though they're standalones, like there are these little hints that he drops about the relation to time frames and people and all of that. And I love picking up on those. Like I obviously don't pick up on everything, but
Well, he does an amazing job of making sure that each plot is a standalone while that plot exists in a larger world.
yes.
And that was fantastic. Like 10 out of 10, no comments. But that larger world, I think, was a little bit overwhelming, even to me, who had read his other books before. Even to me.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like I didn't find it overwhelming, but different readers read the same book differently, obviously. So
Yeah.
your mileage may vary there.
And you're saying that as someone who has read his other books before.
And I am saying that as someone who has read some of his other books before. But even so, like one of the things that I really enjoy about his books is, as I've said, picking up on the little clues that he sprinkles in to talk about or to hint at past books or future books.
I agree with that. I feel like there's a difference between those kind of breadcrumbs versus world building breadcrumbs.
Right, but we're just talking in circles now. Like I'm not
fair enough.
I'm not talking about world building stuff.
I also had the unfortunate experience of reading this while I'm playing Baldur's Gate, which, as everyone knows, is a Dungeons and Dragons video game. And so when the character Amy said, I'm going to cast a history spell, my brain went, that's a skill check, not a spell. Excuse me.
Oh, poor Dan.
Oh no, that was entirely my fault, and I caught it while it was happening. Okay,
right. I know it's your fault. I'm saying poor Dan, whose book has to be evaluated read while you're in that kind of mindset.
It's hard to like do almost a code switch from what are the D&D rules that I'm seeing in front of me and how can I understand them to no, this is a different place. Just because they use the word spell doesn't mean that it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But the magic world that Dan created was so fleshed out that actually did not end up being a big problem. It was just near the beginning a couple of verbal stumbling blocks, you know?
Yeah.
It was so concrete and consistent that I was actually very much able to submerge myself in this world.
Which, given how submersed you've been in Baldur's Gate, that's pretty impressive.
It's feat. It's a feat. And not a feat that you get at level 4, but you know, the other kind of feat. Speaking of things that are in this book that I sure did have to divorce from Baldur's Gate. That's not fair. I don't want to compare this whole book to Baldur's Gate. This book is not D&D. Like, it's a wonderful, beautiful fantasy world that is very explicitly not D&D, and it's selling it short for me to compare everything to it. That's just where my head was at. Like, that's not fair.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes our brains do that.
Yeah.
Especially when you have been so immersed in this video game.
So immersed. Also, there was a dragon. They were in a dungeon and they faced a dragon.
They were in a dungeon and they do face a dragon in this book. A great dragon, too. I really enjoyed the dragon.
I loved the dragon. And part of what I loved about the dragon was how different it was from the stereotypical version of a dragon.
Yes.
It was this incredible subterranean, I was going to say delving, which I think is using the same word too many times. But he's an underground dragon. It's good.
Yeah, and I also really appreciated how much the whole group struggles against the dragon. I feel like too often a dragon is like the final boss.
Or even just the stepping stone.
Or even just the stepping stone, yeah. And this dragon was consistently causing issues, and they were consistently having to deal with it, like, throughout the book.
Well, that's for sure.
Yes. But I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It helped make the dragon feel fresh. I don't know.
And the ways they dealt with the dragon.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give any specifics because this book, like, dude, read this book. But they don't address the dragon in a way you would expect a typical D&D party to do so.
Yeah.
And that makes it so good.
Or even a typical fantasy book to do so.
Yeah, all fantasy is D&D if you think about it. Even this book, while I argue that it's not, well, all fantasy is D&D and all D&D is Tolkien, so.
So the delve is Tolkien.
Yes. We're going to talk about dwarves later.
We are going to talk about dwarves later.
Okay, this book is not Tolkien, but I think you would do it a disservice if you try to ignore the fantasy world or rules. What am I thinking? The fantasy tropes that have come before it.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I mean, hasn't Dan said that? Okay, I don't know about the delve specifically, but I think that he's very explicitly compared the Hollow Road to a D&D campaign.
I believe that. Yeah, that feels right.
I'm like 98% sure.
Yeah.
So there is a D&D influence in the world, which makes sense that it would extend a little bit to this book in particular, even if it's not as explicitly inspired by D&D as his other work.
I think I'm taking it one step further in that Tolkien is kind of the ghost that exists over all fantasy.
Mm.
You are either doing Tolkien or you are not doing Tolkien.
Mm.
It's kind of like the AD BC thing. Right? This is either a Tolkien elf or a non-Tolkien elf.
Mm.
That's how you define everything.
Yeah, okay, I see that.
Which is to say that this is very specifically not a Tolkien fantasy world, but because it's so specifically not a fantasy Tolkien world, it feels like I have to talk about it, how it's not a Tolkien world. It is now I feel like I'm reducing it to just not a Tolkien world, and that's not fair. But that's not a comment on this book. That's a comment on how Tolkien has influenced the fantasy genre.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. All right. So beyond the incredible, amazing subterranean dragons, we also get a incredible technology version of magic that I fucking love.
Yeah, it's really neat the way that the magic works in this world.
And there's this like amazing synergy between, meditation and self-power versus technology. And I don't even want to try to describe it. There are menus, but they are still spells. It's amazing.
Yeah. I like how thought out it feels, right?
Yes.
Like it's not hand wavy.
Having had a couple of conversations with Dan, it does not surprise me that his magic system feels so well thought out.
Yeah, it's not a surprise.
Yeah. But it fits so well into the world that it's presented in.
Yeah. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is one of the first times that I can think of where we have seen more of the, like, I don't want to call it technological aspect because it's still magic, but we see the meditation aspect too, but we see more of a programmatic aspect in this, I think, than we have in some of the previous books. Does that make sense?
It does. Specifically because this is earlier on when they were kind of at their peak, right?
Yeah.
And his earlier books deal with the mayor having magic but not having the technology, and so they sort of have to make do. It's very interesting.
Yeah, in the later books. Well, not
Earlier
the Living
books.
Waters, yeah. Yeah, earlier books publication wise, later books chronologically. I think the Weird Water confluence takes place somewhere in the middle ground between this book and The Hollow Road.
That feels right. I remember there being something about circlets.
There is something about circlets. So I think they're closer, those books are closer to the Delve than they are to Hollow Road. But either way, Hollow Road is we're definitely seeing like the mare in decline.
Whoa, wait. Having been declined, I would say.
Having been declined, yeah. And here we're seeing them right before they start declining.
Yeah.
And I don't think we see them at all in Weird Water Confluence because I think that's all humans.
I think it's all, well, it's not all humans, but
Yeah, okay.
there are no mayor, but we do see like some circlet technology, which is kind of.
We do see circlet technology, but it's not quite as advanced as what we see in the Delve.
Yeah. More importantly, studies show, history shows that anytime there is any advancements in technology, it is immediately used for sex.
Certainly, the Delve would agree with that.
That is only following human nature.
I do love, I mean, I'm not always in the mood to read smutty books, but I do love how Dan has embraced his smutty side.
I almost feel like we did it a disservice by not introducing how much sex there was. There was a good bit.
There's a lot of sex in this book. There's a lot of sex in this book.
There's a lot of good sex in this book. So, my statement stands. All technology, science or magic or otherwise, is immediately used for sex. This is simply a fact of life, and no one can argue with me.
I mean, we certainly see some magic technology sex toys in this book. It's true.
So I don't know about you, but when they were first introduced on the page, I actually stopped and tried to figure out sort of the real world analog for each one. Not that they had to have a real world analog, but I was given a fantasy name and I was like, all right, what is this for? And obviously once I saw it in a scene, I figured it out. But
I was in an airplane, so I wasn't thinking that much about real world applications of fantasy sex toys.
You missed out.
I mean, to be fair, I probably wouldn't have been thinking that much about real world application of fantasy sex toys had I been reading it not on an airplane either.
Each their own. Well, listener, I have taken a brief quote. These sex toys include mesh, cups, suction cones, and joystick. What do you think these were for? Tweet them at Sarah. Is it still called tweeting?
Not technically, but everyone still calls it tweeting. We are still calling it tweeting.
Triple X them at Sarah. That's even better, actually.
It does feel appropriate. The one time the Twitter name change feels appropriate. You can also direct your comments to Lily because she does have a Twitter account.
I mean, you can try.
She's probably not going to see them, but you can tag her too.
I will say the only one that I did not get was joystick because I had Baldur's Gate in my head. So I was like, a joystick is a part of a video game controller. And while they do have a vibrate function, I don't understand. Indeed, that was what it was for. It is the vibrate function.
The joystick is the only one that I actually remember, partially because I'm pretty sure that's what they use in the Living Waters. No, Isle of a Thousand Worlds, which I think was the smutty one. I think that you complained that Living Waters wasn't actually smutty.
Only because it warned us it would be and then wasn't.
Does it warn you that it's going to be? I don't think it does.
That was my complaint. That it was like, there are sex scenes. And I was like, no, there's not.
Does it say that there's sex scenes?
That's my recollection.
I don't think it does. It's the description.
No, not description. Because this book had a page right before the story starts of like, hey, here's what's going on. Here are the warnings, which was wonderful and important and amazing.
I don't remember well enough I think we read that in February of last year.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, yeah. I can just tell you that the blurb on Amazon says that the first book has only one kiss, but the second book is quite steamy and includes explicit consensual sex scenes. Either way, we're not talking about that series. We're talking about The Delve, which has plenty of sex scenes, including sex scenes with his fantasy sex toys.
Indeed. And an asexual character, I think. Skeety sounded ace, at least.
Yeah, I think she was some version of ace.
Yeah. It was very interesting to read a very intense sex scene where one of the participants was just sort of not along for the ride, but indulging the other.
Not in it for the sex itself, yeah. Which I really appreciated. I mean, like, I think it's great to have more representations of the different kinds of ace that there are, because like ace doesn't mean you don't have sex. It just means like that's not what you're into necessarily.
It's not the point, perhaps.
Yeah. It's not the point. You're not sexually attracted to someone, but that has nothing to do with whether or not you will have sex with someone. So I think it's great that we got a different kind of representation.
And Skeety was one of the main characters. She wasn't just like we have to have the sex scene and we have to have a stand-in or something like that. She has a lot of really amazing scenes kicking some incredible ass.
Yeah, I mean, she's pivotal to the plot of the book.
And then she also had a really beautiful sex scene and doing some very kinky stuff while not being that into it, which is fascinating. I say on this side of it. At the time, I was just like, great. You should read this book if you want to get off.
I mean, I was going to say you should read this book if you want a queer, smutty dungeon crawler.
Also, all of those things, yeah.
But if you like sex scenes, then this book does have some good ones.
This book has some incredible characters, some fascinating characters that do develop over time as much as I complain about them. They have...
Well, you haven't complained about them yet.
Well, stick around for the spoiler section. To avoid spoilers, skip to 51:48. I feel like I've read this before, where I'm introduced to one of Dan's characters and I go, this is kind of a basic bitch. And then 3 chapters later, I'm like, oh, this is actually a real ass person.
Yeah, Dan is really good at giving you a character that he then fleshes out as the story progresses. And so you end up finding a lot of new things about the character that you weren't expecting to learn.
I think in this book, it was better executed for some than others.
You're talking about Igland.
I'm talking about Egland, yeah.
Well, Igland.
Egland.
It's a Y.
But they call him Egg.
He's called Egg.
So it must be Egland.
Yeah, but I thought it was still just that was the nickname that he was given that he didn't like. That doesn't necessarily refer to how his name is pronounced.
I assumed that was a hint for how to pronounce his name.
Maybe. Dan, tell us which one is right.
We won't hold it against you, I promise.
No, we won't. It's probably not going to be me. That's fair. That's fine. But if his name starts with a Y, I'm pronouncing it Igland.
Why? Because of European pronunciations? This ain't in Europe.
No, but my default is either French or Japanese.
Which is fair, except the book tells you it's Egg. The book literally tells you it's Egg.
No, the book tells me that his nickname that he doesn't like is Egg, which doesn't mean that his actual name is pronounced Egg.
So it's just random.
He doesn't like that nickname. No, it's because it's similar, but not.
He doesn't like it. That doesn't mean it's phonetically inaccurate.
No, but it doesn't mean that it is phonetically accurate if he doesn't like it.
All right. We're just going to have to wait and find out.
Yes, we will. That's fine.
It's pronounced Igland. I was talking about Egland, though, yes.
Yes. I actually really liked him. I mean, he's an asshole, so I didn't like him, but I thought that I was... okay. A little bit of context. I'm in a Discord server. Dan has talked about the process of writing this book, or when he was writing this book, Dan talked about the process of writing this book in this server. So I was expecting to like Igland less than I did. And I thought that he ended up being, even though he's not a nice character, because he's not nice, I thought he ended up being fairly sympathetic. He does horrible things, but I thought he still ended up being pretty sympathetic.
Okay. Sympathetic, I can get on board with. I felt bad for him. I think he was raised in a culture that values murder.
Yes.
Not that I'm being dramatic. That's not actually true. So the name of the book, The Delve, refers to the adventure that our three main characters are on, which is a delve. And Egland, as sort of the, not main character, but he's the leader of the delve, right? I think it's explicit.
I mean, that is explicit. He is the one who is going on the delve, and the two other people with him are like his support team.
If he kills 5 people, then he will be heroic. And that's a bad metric. Whoever invented that society, not Dan, just like in general, sometimes cultures are bad. You know how that happens sometimes, and how sometimes cultures value violence and they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's definitely a product of his culture, for better or for worse.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
But he's going into this adventure saying, I must kill 5 things. And like, how is that not setting someone up for failure?
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree with you. And he's also not really all that nice about it. Not that one can be nice about going into something saying, I must kill 5 things.
Not just 5 things, because he kills way more than 5 things. But he's like,
it's like,
that was too small to count. So you're like, oh, you must murder 5 people. Okay.
Yeah, he requires 5 major kills. But I was still impressed at how Dan managed to make me like him for the most part, despite that.
I really think that's mostly because of Ardo.
It's possible.
In my opinion. Because even if it's not because of Ardo, who is one of the other mayor on this delve, as Eglin's partner, Ardo is the reason why we see his softer side.
Well, yes. Okay, that I do agree with. Like, it's the relationship that the two of them have that make Igland feel like someone who is not a terrible person, just a person within his culture.
Yes. And we also get to see another side of him.
Yeah.
The I almost said troubadour. That's not right. Taking on a front. There's a word for that. I'll think about it in an hour from now.
When we're done recording.
Yeah, probably. Affront is not the right word. It sounds like it's the right word, but it's not. Facade? No, it's not a verb. I don't know. Whatever. You know what I mean.
The relationship that he has with Ardo allows us to see a non-violent side of him.
Yes, which we definitely needed.
Which we need, yeah, because when we just see the side of him that's focused on the delve and the implications that killing these 5 things has for him. And to be fair, I think some of that is there's talk about his sword and the way that he acts with his sword, and not to say that his sword is some kind of like malevolent, like it's not. I think that's more a metaphor than an actual like thing that his sword is doing.
I was just about to ask, do we think the sword influenced him?
I don't think it's the sword itself.
It feels like more of a symbol, I think.
Yeah, like I think it's a symbol for what the sword means.
Culturally, yeah.
Culturally, yeah. But there's a lot of talk about how he's a worse person when he has the sword, and how Annie and Ardo don't like him as much like when he's holding the sword. And I think that's a stand-in for the way that he becomes when he has the sword in hand and feels like violence is the only way.
When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I think, is maybe what Egland was dealing with.
Yeah.
He has a sword and he's got to get 5 kills. Otherwise, everyone's going to make fun of him, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think he's a really insecure person.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Still sucks. We're in the spoiler section, so I can say the end of the book went a lot towards my sympathy for him. I think I would like him a lot more on a reread, knowing that he ultimately gives it all up for Ardo. Not for Ardo, but like kind of.
Kind of for Ardo.
Kind of for him, right?
Kind of for Ardo, yeah. Yeah. I do think that he's a character who's more sympathetic when you
if you know
more
how
about
he
the
ends
end
up.
game.
Yeah.
And this is all hearsay because I haven't actually read the final book in the Hollow Road trilogy, but I think there's a connection between, or my understanding is that there's a villain in that who is like a mayor who's been in a sleep for a long time called Igland. And that's the character that we see replace him in the coffin or whatever it is at the very end of the book.
Interesting.
And so the Igland we see in The Place Below. So that character has the name of Igland, and he was supposed to originally be the Igland that we have come to, I won't say love, but come to
know and appreciate.
Know and appreciate in the Delve. And then, of course, he gives everything up for Ardo and goes on to be a mayor spy of some sort, where someone else in the military takes his place in this way of bringing people back later.
There was another really beautiful relationship with the Timon and Pumbaa.
I would say Timon.
I would say Timon. The way I would say Maier, which is to not be confused with another word I might be saying.
Dan, please correct us on this too.
We get a really beautiful sapphic relationship between Skeety and I don't remember the queen's name.
Landa?
Yeah, Landa.
I thought the queen was the ace one, not Skeety.
Okay, well, open to interpretation.
And again, I did not reread this book for the podcast because I read it recently enough, but that also means that I read it like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
Landa is the one who has bondage sex acts done upon her, and Skeety has verbiage along the lines of Landa likes to kiss her, but she doesn't really get why. It sounds more like she's doing these acts to Landa because she loves Landa, not necessarily because she gets anything out of it.
I agree. I guess I thought that it was the queen who was having the stuff done to her.
It is.
Oh, okay. No.
Yeah.
Regardless, I thought it was the queen who was Ace, but that's possibly just because it's been a while since I read the book.
Between the two of them, it's pretty clear, like, Skeety doesn't get much out of it except that Landa likes it.
I will definitely defer to your opinion in this because you have read it more recently than I have.
It is not funny, but extremely satisfying and fitting to me that the most amazing master of their metalworking craft uses her powers for banging.
I mean, basically everyone uses their powers for banging in this book.
Yeah, that feels very natural and true. If there's something you're good at, you're gonna use it for banging.
If that's what you're into.
Right, yes. If you're into banging and you're good at something, you're gonna use it to bang. How's that?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. Every time there was a description of some incredible like metal crafting turning into a sex toy or something else. I was like, of course. Oh yeah, of course. What else would they use this for? Of course they use this for sex.
Of course, yeah.
That's just human nature, except they're timing, but human nature.
People nature.
Yeah. Sentient nature.
Yeah, sentient nature. As I mentioned, it is lovely to see Dan embrace his smutty side and his sex scenes. Because his books, as he has been writing, his books have gotten progressively smuttier.
There were quite a few. Okay, so we have the sapphic scene between Skeety and Landa. That's also like a very much a sort of a BDSM-esque scene. We have some fairly vanilla moments between Eglund and Ardo, but there is still like some power play there just because Eglund is the knight and Ardo is the squire.
Yeah, I mean, there's a power imbalance that's inherent to the relationship,
but not necessarily in the sex play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's the power imbalance inherent in Landa being the fucking queen.
Yes, that too.
It doesn't feel like it as much because Skeety is the one in control of the scene that we see between them.
Yeah.
And then we also have Annie, who's the third mayor character on this delve, with the human that gets captured eventually. Captured and then recaptured. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, and well, we also see Annie with Ardo.
Oh, we do see Annie with Ardo. I have to say that's most fun because it makes Eglund get its head out of his ass a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciated that. But I have to say, I mean, I just did not understand what Annie's obsession with this human thief was. Like, sure, she found him attractive. Okay, you can find people who are actively working against you and killing your compatriots attractive, whatever. But like, she has sex with him. She has feelings for him. I just didn't get it.
The sex is way after he's putting their lives in danger, to be fair.
Right. But still, I don't know. That was the one thing that I was like, Annie, what are you doing?
I also didn't
What
get
are
it.
you doing?
He is described as having some magnetic property to Skeety as well. And Ardo.
His eyes were really pretty, right? He had pretty eyes.
Everyone is like, oh yeah, I get it. I get why she's so into him. And I was like, do you? Do you? Really?
Like, I get the attraction. What I don't understand is why she acted on it. Even though he had already been captured, even though like that was all over, I don't know. I personally would not have been able to get over what he did to everyone.
Okay, so she acted on it because it was the last chance before he was going to go to jail forever because he killed a bunch of people.
Right. And I would not
get all hot and bothered for a mass murderer.
I would not. No. No.
Well, the book very specifically says he doesn't kill anybody. You know, the way that okay, maybe this is it. The way that Annie was distraught when Eglund fell into bloodlust is the same situation for the human whose name I forget.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either.
For the two humans who do kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's definitely some mirroring between the Mayor group and the human group.
There is, and maybe if we saw more of his actions to specifically try to thwart some of the stuff, because the humans are very definitely the villains in this book, right?
Oh yeah, I love it.
There's no argument there. And so if we had seen more of this human thief trying to thwart what his compatriots do, instead of he says he doesn't agree with it, but he still kind of he goes along with it.
Yeah.
He helps some of it happen, even though he doesn't kill anyone. He's not working against them. So I can't be like, okay, he's a human, but he's a good human, right?
We're supposed to believe that when he steals the magic items, he was instructed to kill them, but chose not to. So that's one.
But he still stole from them.
Okay, but if he was supposed to murder them, stealing is better.
Yeah, but it's not enough to negate him not contradicting any of the murder that his compatriots do. I don't know.
The only other scene is near the very end when he interrupts a fight so that the Mayor get one over on the humans at the last fight scene.
Yeah, I do vaguely remember him interrupting a fight so that Eglund doesn't actually die.
So that's one scene. And then after that, he interrupts again so that they can actually get one over and win.
Okay, I don't know.
So he interrupts twice. It's not enough. I'm not actually arguing with you.
Yeah. It was for me, it was not enough. I was like, Annie, sure, you can find him hot, but I don't know why you are so hot and bothered.
Clearly he cast a spell over her. Now I sound like Eglund. Oh no, I have become he who I scorn.
I mean, I hope he at least had a big dick so that she enjoyed the sex with him.
No, but he had a big tongue.
Okay. I'm glad she got something out of it.
There you go.
I'm glad she got something out of it, but I didn't understand her obsession with him.
Also, he didn't have a big tongue. I was making a joke. Good one. It's just to defend Dan's writing powers. That was not something that he tried to pass off as a good thing. I was making a joke. So this might just be because we have been reading The Lord of the Rings, which, as I mentioned, I compare all fantasy to, as one does.
As one does.
But reading about the Timon versus how Tolkien does the dwarves so dirty was really, really nice. I mean, the Timons still get done dirty in this book. No. I should say, they get fucking shit on, but they are explored as a people much better than Tolkien ever does.
They go through some very rough things. They have a hard time of it.
Yeah.
But they don't, narratively, they don't get shit on.
Right.
It's not the text ignoring them.
Yes.
They go through a hard time.
They have a culture and they have a leader and they're very sad about the genocide and all that stuff, which is much better than Tolkien ever did for his dwarves.
They're not ignored.
No, they're very important. And I kind of love at the end when Landa says, Nah, fuck you guys. Basically, to the mayor. Everyone's dead. We're going to somewhere else, and we're not going to give you your magic rock anymore.
I mean, and who could blame her?
No, that was amazing. I cheered for her in that moment.
Yeah, she made the right call.
Absolutely.
Like, her people have been
halved,
going through a rough time. Yeah.
Roughly half of this population was murdered. What else was she gonna do? Yeah.
And yet, Amy still wants to bone the thief.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on. I've got it out of my system.
It's not fun when I agree with you.
It's not fun when you agree with me. No, that's not the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast is to disagree with us.
Well, she was right. He did fuck real good. So.
At least she got that out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt really bad for the Timon. Like, they go through some shit.
Yeah. I mean, even more because when we see later books, they don't exist anymore. So who knows what happens?
Yeah, but it also feels bad because it feels like they're collateral damage between the war between the humans and the mayor.
I feel like that's the point of this book, though.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, but that is part of why what happens, I think, feels so bad is because it's not directed at them.
Right. It's because they are providing a resource to the mayor, and so the humans just murder a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's Dan has an eye for the political as well as the sexy.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I've been reading some fan fiction.
Yes.
And I found an author that I would like, except they split their sex scenes between chapter breaks.
I don't know that that's a bad thing. I mean,
it's a bad thing, Sarah. If you're trying to enjoy it, it's a bad thing.
It happens often enough that I don't think it's an unusual thing.
It can be a usual thing, but it's still a bad thing. A sex scene, like, if you're trying to do anything for anybody, it should be in one specific scene. Otherwise, it is just the most transparent bullshit of, like, stringing people along for the next chapter when you're releasing a fan fiction chapter by chapter. And that sucks. Even as I was doing, if you're reading it after it's all done, I still have to wait for the page to load, so that's still very interruptive.
Well, if it's on AO3, you can read all the chapters all at once in one big file.
I didn't do that because I didn't think anyone would do that to me. Because what psycho would do that?
Right, but it's a common thing. Or at least it's not uncommon.
Okay, but it's gross and rude, and it's my pet peeve. Okay, actually, I don't have to defend this. It's just my pet peeve. I hate it.
You don't have to defend it. It's true. It can be your pet peeve. No explanation necessary.
Don't split your sex scene over chapters. What the fuck?
I mean, I do, for all that I'm playing devil's advocate, I do prefer my sex scenes to be in a chapter and not broken up. Unless it's 2 full chapters of sex scenes, I can get behind that. But
even then, there should be some kind of, rise and fall and interim between the chapters, if you will. It should flow.
I do think it should flow. I do think you can't just, you have to have a natural break when you have a chapter break.
You can't stop halfway through a blowjob, is all I'm saying.
Okay,
that was bad.
That's a little bad. That's a little bad. I'll grant you that.
Yeah. That's my pet peeve. Give me the whole scene. What the fuck? No one enjoyed themselves.
I hope the characters enjoyed themselves.
I won't know because it's still in another chapter.
Did you not read it? Did you just back out of it?
No, I read it. They enjoyed themselves. I was being dramatic.
Okay.
Yeah. But I made a point. My point stands.
Yeah, but you should know I'm not going to let you just be dramatic like that.
Fine. Fun.
Accuracy, goddammit.
Oh, fair enough. I did get tricked into reading an incomplete work because it was a work in a series and there was a work after this one. So I thought, clearly this one is done. Nope.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So that sex scene never finished.
Presumably you mean the story is not finished, but that particular sex scene is finished? No.
But that's my fault. I read an unfinished work, which you should never do.
Well, you can do.
And then this happens.
You just have to do it with the knowledge that possibly it will never be finished.
Maybe I would be less annoyed if it was a completed sex scene and not just...
I bet you would. I mean, like, you might still be annoyed a little bit, but if you could just press next chapter, that's a temporary annoyance.
I did once. See, the thing is, I pressed next chapter, and then I pressed it again and was like, what? No, it's done? What? Oh no.
Wait, you mean there was a next chapter and then you pressed it again and there wasn't a chapter after that?
Right.
But the sex scene was still broken up.
Yes. The sex scene was broken up and incomplete.
Okay, see, what I think the issue is here is not that the sex scene was over 2 chapters, but it sounds like it's over 3 chapters and incomplete.
The problem is that web pages take time to load. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Apparently there's a way to load it all at once, so never mind. I didn't know that, but I will do that next time.
I'm pretty sure that AO3 has an option where if you go to...
You are assuming that I read this on AO3, and you're right, but I would still like to complain.
Sure, you can complain. Today you learned.
TIL, yes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and some other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.